So what do the three types of markets, a buyer's market, a balanced market, and a seller's market mean, and how do they differ from each other? Well, that's exactly what we're talking about in this video. My name is Mike Banks. I'm a local realtor here in the Edmonton and area region. And on this channel, we talk about all things real estate. So buyer's market, balanced market, seller's market. What are the difference and what do they mean? Well, there's a saying in real estate, and that is that if the market is named after you, that is a good thing. So if you're a buyer and it's a buyer's market, well, the market is named after you, so that is a good thing. If you're a buyer and it's a seller's market, not such a good thing. However, if you're a seller and it's a seller's market, that is a good thing. So these three types of markets, they are a little bit different, and they do have their advantages and disadvantages depending on how you look at it and which type of, which part of the transaction process you are in, whether you're a buyer or a seller. Now, in order to help make this more sense, I'm gonna share my screen right now because looking at this visually will help it make a lot more sense. So ultimately, there are two main metrics that real estate professionals use to determine what type of market we're in, and that is sales to new listings ratio. It's also sometimes called an absorption rate, and also months of inventory, which also can be called an absorption rate as well. And basically it's just factoring in how many properties sold versus how many came on the market, because every time you add more inventory onto the market, that's adding more supply. And every time you make a sale, that's taking away supply. So that affects the basic laws of economics, supply and demand. And months of inventory, again, sometimes called an absorption rate, that helps determine how long would it take to actually sell off all of the inventory. It's also indicative of what type of buyer and seller activity is going on, just like the sales to new listing ratio is as well. It just gives us a gauge of what kind of activity is going on in the market. So generally in a buyer's market, it does kind of depend, right, who you talk to, but the general sort of assumption and the general sort of guideline that we go by is that months of inventory in a buyer's market is anything that is 6 months plus. Anything that's about 4 to 6 months of inventory, which again, we'll get into the numbers and how they actually relate to the market here in a second, but 4 to 6 months of inventory is considered a balanced market. So kind of, that sweet spot in the middle. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. It's kind of a Goldilocks market. And then anything 0 to 3 months, things are selling really, really quickly, so that would be a seller's market. And again, if the market is named after you, that is a good thing because things are selling really, really quickly. That's why it's called a seller's market. The reason why it's called a buyer's market is because there is a lot of inventory available to a buyer, so they have a lot of choice. The market is in their favor. And with a balanced market, again, there's no real advantage to the seller or the buyer. They're just, the market's kind of happily in the middle, just sort of warm. It's not hot, it's not cold. Now, when it comes to sales to new listings, that ratio, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit opposite as the months of inventory, because with sales to new listings, when the number is high, that means things are selling really, really quickly. And when the number is low, it means things aren't selling that quickly. And when it's kind of in the middle, again, it's a balanced market. So the general assumption with sales to new listings is anything 60% plus is considered a seller's market. And anything that's around 40 to 60% is kind of that sweet spot in the middle. And that's sort of considered a balanced market. And anything 40% and lower is considered a buyer's market. So let's put this into actual numbers so to help make sense of all of this. So if we look right here, basically the sales to new listing ratio is essentially just that. It's taking all of the sales for the month and dividing it into all of the new listings for the month. So if you take 1,017 sales divided by 1,418 new listings, we have a number of 71.7%. So 71% of the sale, or 71% sales to new listings, right? Now that is considered quite high. That's above 60%. So this is just the current month, right? So it doesn't tell the whole picture. We want to extrapolate out this data a little bit farther than just the current month, but this would technically say that in the month of November, based on these numbers, that Edmonton was in a seller's market, which would kind of defy logic, right? Because a lot of people are talking about how the sky is falling. Well, the data tells the truth. Now, if you take this number, so total inventory, this is how much inventory there is in the entire market in the city of Edmonton. There's 4,742 active listings. Divide 1,017, so that's how many sold last month, November 2020. Divide that into this, we would get 4.64 months of inventory. So it would take in theory 4.64 months to sell off all of the current inventory at the rate that things are currently selling. Now, as I said earlier, 0 to 3 months is considered a seller's market. 4 to 6 months is generally considered a balanced market. Anything 6 plus is considered a buyer's market. So we're actually knocking on that door of a seller's market, because we're right at 4.64 months of inventory, and 0 to 3, we're close, right? We're not actually at it, but we're close. We're knocking on that door of almost a seller's market, which is, again, kind of what was displayed here with these numbers of sales to new listings. Now, there's no real hard and fast rule for days on market, what's considered, buyer's market balance or seller's market. However, days on market are worth paying attention to, because this is an indication of how fast homes are selling. So how many days on average it's taking to sell a home. So there's no hard and fast numbers or even assumptions that I'm aware of with days on market, but I mean, kind of common sense would tell us that if things are selling, in 20 days or less, that's a pretty hot market. Things are selling very, very quickly, right? So that would be indicative of a seller's market. Things are, not happening fast, but they're not taking too long either. That would be a balanced market. And if things are taking a very long time to sell, on average, that would be a buyer's market. But typically what we lean on and rely on as real estate professionals is months of inventory. So this number, and this number, and then also sales to new listings. So now again, this is just for the monthly basis. If you take this number, so this is the whole year. So there's been 11,000 sales so far in the entire year of 2020, and there's been 21,000 new listings in the year 2020. If you take that number, so you divide this into this number, we get a total year sales to listings ratio of 52%. So that basically means that half of all properties that come on the market are selling, right? So again, right bang in the middle. 52% is essentially the middle, right? 50%. So that would indicate that we are in a balanced market. So just to recap, if the market is named after you, that's generally a good thing, or it is a good thing. Months of inventory, so 0 to 3 months or 0 to 4 months, however you want to look at it, is considered a seller's market. 4 to 6 months is considered a balanced market. And 6 months plus, it means taking a very long time. It would take a very long time to absorb all of the inventory. That is a buyer's market. And sales to new listings or sales to listings, generally 0 to 40% is considered a buyer's market. 40 to 60% is considered a balanced market, and anything 60% plus, meaning sales are happening really quickly, that is considered a seller's market. So what does all of this mean? Now, like I said earlier, depending on which end of the spectrum you are on, it could be a good or a bad thing. So here's something to consider, right? So if you are a buyer in a seller's market, that generally kind of sucks for you, because basically there's not a lot of supply. There's a lot of buyers looking for a limited supply. So that's what creates a seller's market. There's limited supply, basic supply and demand. There's limited supply, and there's a lot of demand. So if you're a buyer in a seller's market, there generally means that there's going to be a lot of multiple offer situations, which can really, really play a toll on emotions, the emotional aspect of a buyer, because getting into a multiple offer situation can be quite stressful, and it's not very enjoyable, to be honest. Now, if you're a seller in a seller's market, having multiple offers can be the greatest thing ever, because you have lots of options to choose from, whether the price, is what they're looking for, whether the qualifications of the buyer is what they're looking for. So it can be a good thing. Now, here's where things get a little bit different. So let's say you're a seller in a seller's market. So the market is named after you. You're happy, right? You're like, yay, I'm going to sell my house really, really quickly, and it's going to sell for a top price, even over asking price. Those all seem like great things. But what happens when you sell your home? Well, generally, you need somewhere else to live, right? So maybe you're selling your home to relocate, so you're moving to a different market, so this wouldn't even be relevant to you. However, if you're selling your home to move to a bigger home or downsize or whatever the reason may be, and you're staying in the same market, well, selling into a seller's market may be great, but guess what happens on the other end? If you are going to buy your home, you're not going to rent. Well, now you're a buyer in a seller's market. So although you might sell for top dollar and very quickly, now you're a buyer who's buying back into that same seller's market, paying top dollars. So, it's not always just because you're a seller in a seller's market that's a great thing. Now, if you're a buyer, for example, things are a little bit different, right? Because when buyers buy their home, they generally don't move very often. They're staying put. So if you're a buyer in a buyer's market, that is the ultimate position to be in, because you're going to buy into a buyer's market, meaning you have a lot of choices, prices are likely down, and by the time you are ready to sell or move up or downsize or whatever the situation may be, as a buyer, chances are, because that time period has passed, you might now be a seller in a seller's market. However, just like I explained earlier, what happens if you're a seller in a seller's market and then you need to buy back into the market? So guys, the main thing here is that nobody can predict where the market is headed or where it's going. Ultimately, you just got to do you. Whether you're a buyer in a buyer's market, a buyer in a seller's market, or a seller in a seller's market, or a seller in a buyer's market, you just ultimately, like, real estate is a long-term play generally, and you just have to do what's best for you and your situation and your family and whatever makes the most sense for that. So if you found this video helpful, please let me know. If there's anything that did not make sense whatsoever, I know we were talking about quite a bit, leave a comment down below. I'll be happy to answer your question, or better yet, in the description below will be my contact information. You can reach out to me and I will happily, I mean that, I will happily answer any questions that you have about the market or about your buying or selling situation whatsoever here in the Edmonton and area region. Again, my name is Mike Banks. I'm a local realtor here in the Edmonton region, and if you made it this far, why not take this relationship to the next level? Consider subscribing to the channel for all things real estate, or consider watching one of these other videos I'll put on the screen right now, and I'll see you in the next video.